Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we hear from Jim Gash, president of Pepperdine University. From shaping the future of Christian higher education to leading justice reform efforts in Uganda, Jim shares how Pepperdine is raising up leaders rooted in purpose, service, and leadership. This episode dives into what it looks like to serve faithfully in positions of influence, and how saying yes to hard things can open doors to unimaginable impact. If you're serious about servant leadership on a global scale, this one's for you.
Well, President Gash, thank you for joining us on the Servant Leadership Podcast.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
I am so excited. We're sitting at arguably the most beautiful campus in all the world, especially America.
Yeah.
How did Pepperdine come to be?
Well, first going back to your comment, one of my predecessors, I'm number 8. Number 4, Bill Banowski used to say, Pepperdine is the kind of campus that God himself would have built, if only he could afford it. So if any of your listeners have been to Pepperdine, they'll know exactly what we're talking about. If they haven't been, then just simply Googling Pepperdine Malibu will give you a taste, but you need to come out and see it because it's something special. We're on about 900 acres in Malibu, overlooking the Pacific, right adjacent to the Pacific Coast Highway. So we're nestled in the Santa Monica Mountains across next to the Pacific Coast Highway, which is next to the beach. And so how we came about was George Pepperdine, a businessman who was an auto parts supplier. He was the first auto parts supplier. He kind of created the business for add-ons to the newly developed automobiles. This was, again, in the 1930s. He decided what he wanted to do with the money he made when he started Western Auto Supply was to create a Christian university, one that would honor God and prepare young men and women to be servant leaders. That was his stated goal. So he created something in downtown Los Angeles. Back then, downtown Los Angeles was thought to be closer to the ocean than we think of it now because there wasn't a lot in between. And so the Pepperdine University mascot in 1937 in downtown Los Angeles was the waves. Like, how did they possibly know we were going to end up in Malibu? And they didn't, but wow. God did. So we ended up as the waves. And then as that grew and developed into kind of a regional Christian university with strong academics and a serious faith commitment and really increasingly good athletics, it had a pivot in the early 1970s when it moved to Malibu. And so that was as a result of what we believe is God's providence of opening up the opportunity for Pepperdine to acquire, first portion by gift and then some acquisitions thereafter, a campus that is unlike any other. And so we are now 5 schools within one university. A 6th school is being added in August. So we're the undergraduate, which we call Seaver College, the law school, the Caruso School of Law, the Grazio Dio Business School, the Graduate School of Education Psychology, the School of Public Policy, and we're starting in the fall of this year, August of 25, the College of Health Science, which will have several different programs underneath it, including nursing, speech-language pathology, physician assistant, physical therapy, etc. So that's kind of the bird's eye view of who Pepperdine is, how we came to be, and what we exist, or what we consist of.
Walking through campus, it feels different. And it's not just that it's beautiful, but one of the things that you focus on is building and empowering servant leaders among your students. What do you think makes this different, and why is that such a priority for you?
Well, it's a combination of why we exist and what the world needs. So why we exist is to prepare students to be kind of faithful servants of those around them, equipped to lead those around them, and inspired by a group of men and women, faculty and administration that show them what it looks like to walk the path that they're trying to walk. So we've got some people who have walked this journey. They're walking behind them and say, what does that look like? And so what we are composed of on our leadership team is people who have demonstrated lives of what we say purpose, service, and leadership. That's kind of Pepperdine's mantra, Christian university dedicated to preparing students for lives of of purpose, service, and leadership. So you take the service and leadership together.
Right.
Well, why? Why do you want to be a leader? Why do you want to serve? Well, there's a greater purpose. We believe that there is a greater purpose for human existence, for university preparation of students to lead, for every aspect of our lives. There's a greater purpose that's behind all of that. And we believe that if you're prepared in an environment where your mind is challenged and fed and mentored, along with your spirit being fed and challenged and mentored, you're going to be exactly the kind of person that this world needs, which is somebody who is capable and willing to lead, but someone who does so from a humility standpoint, saying, I want to make you better. I love you enough to help make you better, and I want to make the world better. And I've been equipped by my education at Pepperdine and driven by the purpose that I'm standing on to do that.
I love that. Well, a lot of people I know that are close with you talk about you being an amazing servant leader.
That's very kind.
What was your journey like to Pepperdine and to become president of Pepperdine University?
Yeah, it was a surprising one for me. I never set out to be president. You know, I grew up in an awesome Christian family where we were very involved in sports, and I was from a young age drawn to the position of I was in kindergarten. I was the pitcher on our t-ball team. So when you're a pitcher on a t-ball team, like, let that sink in. You don't actually throw the ball, but you're the one who is right there in the center. You're the shortstop in a t-ball team.
Right.
You're right there in the center, directing traffic. You're the first person the ball comes to. In basketball, I was the point guard. In football, I was the quarterback. Like, I was drawn to, like, give me the ball. I want to be involved in where the action is. And so that continued up through college. I was a college quarterback at Abilene Christian. And then, you know, when I went to law school, I became the editor-in-chief of the Law Review. And so there were just things that I was drawn to that I wanted to be part of making the things I was involved in as good as they could possibly be. To the greatest extent I was able to do so. Now, there were a whole lot of people a whole lot better than me at a lot of things that we did. And so, you know, I was not the best wide receiver. I don't have any wheels. You know, I wasn't a blocker. I don't have the kind of girth, but I was willing to invest in the analytical aspect of being a quarterback, so I became a quarterback. So when it came to, like, what was after law school, I fell in love with law teaching while I was in law school. I had some incredible mentors, you know, Janet Kerr and Bob Brain and Ron Phillips, people who showed me what it looked like to be excellent in the classroom and to be engaged with students outside of the classroom and to be engaged with scholarship in the library or in your office. And it's like, what I want to do with my life is I want to be a law professor. That's what I wanted to do. And so I met with the then dean, and Ron Phillips, and said, what's the pathway to becoming a professor? And he says, well, you know, there are 5 things. You need to do these 5 things to maximize your chances of being a professor. And so, okay, you give me a task list. And so I went off and did 4 of those 5. One of them, I had gotten married and really wasn't in the life plan to be able to go back to get another advanced degree in law. And so I did 4 of those, which included some of the things that I did in law school, how, you know, being editor-in-chief and how the grades went. And then the next steps, practicing law at the highest level with a top firm to get experience, and working for a judge, working for, you know, as a law clerk to a federal judge. And so I did those things. And when the opportunity came to be a law professor, I thought, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. I applied to one law school to go to law school, Pepperdine, because I saw what it stood for, and the experience I had was what I wanted to be a part of for other students. The kind of mentoring and the kind of leadership that I got to watch, the kind of excellence in the classroom that I got to experience, I wanted to be part of that. So I thought I'd teach the rest of my life. And I applied to one law school to teach, and when I got the offer to come to teach Pepperdine, I thought, I'm going to be here until God calls me home, or somebody around me tells me it's time for you to step aside. And so I got to do that for a number of years. I taught the law school for 20 years. Wow. And during that time, you know, I was a law professor only, and then I was an associate dean for student life when Ken Starr became dean, one of my life mentors. and he invited me to become the inaugural Associate Dean for Student Life, Academic, Social, Spiritual Life of the law school. And we agreed to do that. I'd do it for 2 years. After the first year, he said, it's working for me. Is it working for you? Okay, I'll do this as long as you're dean. And so we did that for 5 more years. And then he went off to Baylor to become president. And I said, okay, let this cup pass. Let me go back to being a faculty member. During that time, I had started doing a bunch of stuff in the developing world, in prisons in Uganda, had moved there for 6 months. And then, so I was a law professor for the next, call it 7 years of just being a law professor, I guess 6 years, and doing the global justice thing. And then when the next dean came after the one after Ken, he invited me back into the dean suite, associate dean for strategic planning and external relations. So strategic planning, self-evident, external relations, fundraising, and alumni. Well, I did that for a year before my immediate predecessor, Andy, announced his retirement. And when that happened, well, then there was a question of who Andy's successor would be. And the previous 4 presidents had been the executive vice president. So it was, we knew who was going to be next president. It was the EVP. Well, he made pretty clear pretty early he was not going to be a candidate. So then the process unfolded with who, and then you look back on it and say, well, what was the board looking for in the next president? And I didn't apply. You could apply or you could be nominated. And I figured, I don't want to apply because if I apply and nobody nominates me, well, I shouldn't be president if nobody's nominating me. And I've got a real self-awareness problem if I think I ought to be president and nobody else does. So when Korn Ferry, the search firm, called and says, we have these nominations, are you willing to proceed? Then I've been praying about this with my wife for a while. And then we met with each of our 3 kids and said, individually, you have a veto power. If you decide individually, I don't want my dad to be the president of Pepperdine because of the way it affects my life, I would have stayed where I was and been happy. But they were all supportive. And when the process unfolded and they handed me the baton, it was big job, bigger God, we're good. And so that's kind of how it unfolded. Wow. Is the various things that happened along the way. What they were looking for, they're looking for someone who was demonstrated an ability to speak publicly. Well, that's what a law professor does. Okay, I mean, that's what you're constantly in the classroom speaking. Someone who is entrepreneurial. Well, if you want to get stuff done in the developing world, you better be entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. Someone with a global vision for Pepperdine. Well, not only had I taught abroad 3 different times in our programs, our various programs, but I'd also done quite a bit of work in the developing world on multiple continents. And they thought, okay, well, check that box. Someone who was very serious about the Christian mission of this place and demonstrated that. And I don't think that was ever a question about me. And someone who was able to raise money. And part of what I did for the law school and for the global justice program was telling stories about who we are and how people could use what God's given them to leave a legacy of service through equipping students. And so ultimately, someone coming from associate dean to the president wasn't the normal pathway, but it was almost like Slumdog Millionaire. Like all of these things happened, such you look back on it and say, I didn't decide to go to Uganda 30 times so I could be president of Pepperdine. That was not even part of the thought. But the board saw fit to make me the offer, and it's been a ride for now nearly 6 years, 5 3/4 years.
A lot of people in that position would focus just on the presidency at Pepperdine, and just look inward at how do we make this place better, which I know you spend a ton of time doing.
And my team. I got a great team that I get to work with on that.
You also have mentioned the developing world, and I know you do a lot in Uganda. Share some of the story of how Uganda specifically even came about and in the journey there.
Yeah. So this is 2007, and I'm the Dean of Students, the Associate Dean for Student Life, and our students were a chunk of them were very globally minded. I didn't grow up in an age where we had internet. I didn't grow up in an age where people traveled to the developing world, but the current students and the students 15 years ago, like that was part of their world. They knew the developing world, and they were interested in going there. And so they had a gathering, a 1-week gathering at the law school called IJM Week, International Justice Mission. They're a phenomenal Christian organization that does justice work around the globe. And so they invited people to come speak during that week. And one of them they invited to speak was a guy that I'd never heard of named Bob Goff. Now, Bob is someone a lot of people have heard of since. But they invited Bob to speak, and he spoke to about 200 students at lunch. And I wasn't there because I was doing what administrators do, having lunch at my desk and trying to get stuff done. And 2 students, Matt and Liz, came running up to my office after that was over, and they said, Dean Gash, we want to go to Uganda with Bob Goff. I'm like, I got 2 questions for you. Who's Bob Goff? Where's Uganda? Now, I'd heard of Uganda, but you showed me an African map, the continent of Africa. I could tell you where South Africa was, powers of deduction, and I could tell you where Egypt was because I grew up, Bible stories of Moses in Egypt.
Right.
But I couldn't have told you where Uganda was on the map. So they walked me through, Bob is putting together this judicial conference where they're going to have all the judges in the country there, and we want to go there and see if we can be helpful. So I ran next door to Ken Starr's office and said, what do you think? And he said, let's send them. So they came back after 10 days and said, the justices in Uganda have no law clerks, no judicial clerks. They have no interns. Most of them don't have computers. They just have a pen and paper. We could be their interns. We could be their law clerks. Can we go for the summer? Okay. So we sent 3 for the summer. They came back with these big ideas about how Pepperdine as an institution could engage with the judiciary of the country. So we sent 10 the summer of 2008. And in summer of 2009, we sent Ken, our dean, and our director of international programs, study programs, and then another 10 students. And then I encountered Bob again. Bob Goff was the speaker at the Christian Legal Society National Conference in San Diego, his hometown. And this is in 2009, the fall of 2009, and he's talking about love. He's giving a speech that he called Love Does. Before there was a book, Love Does, that sold several million copies, there was a speech. And in that speech, he talked about this juvenile remand home, a juvenile prison in rural Uganda where kids who had been arrested and teenagers arrested and warehoused, waiting for someone to do something to move their cases toward trial. And he said, but I'll remember this as long as I can remember anything. He said, our God is a God of justice, and he's nuts about kids. So this is one of those, the students have been like, you're dean of students, you should come with us. And I've been resisting. And I continued to resist until Baroness Carolyn Cox, member of the British House of Lords, came to Pepperdine for a talk this time I went. And she talked about using your God-given education and your passion to serve those in greatest need. And she talked about going to war-torn areas and trying to be helpful to them. And one of the attendees asked a question at the end. He raised his hand and said, is it better to travel halfway across the world to visit somebody in their deepest, darkest hour and to try to be helpful to them? Or is it better to take the money you spent going over there and send it to them so they can use it? And she said, please go, and here's why. She said, if you travel halfway across the world, then someone will know that someone on the other side of the world knew about them and cared about them enough to come. And you're going to be a great encouragement to them. And when you come home, you're going to have a massive ripple effect on those around you because you won't be able to unsee what you've seen. You won't be able to unlearn what you learned. And you're going to be inspired to go again and inspire them. And I thought, what a great response. What a great reason for us to send more students. We should send more students because at that time my Bible was, there they are, Lord, send them, rather than here am I, send me. But God worked on my heart, and over the course of that fall semester, we put together a crew, 4 lawyers, 4 Pepperdine lawyers, 2 people who worked for Pepperdine, 2 people who were graduates, to go to that juvenile remand home that Bob put on the screen and talked about, to try to give them access to justice. We met with them for a week, and as a result of that week, preparing their cases for trial, moving them forward, making sure that the judiciary was equipped to move their cases forward. That changed my entire life forever, for the better.
Wow.
Not always for the funner or for the more fun. But then that led to me moving to Uganda in 2012 after several more trips to different juvenile remand homes and to help the Ugandan judiciary and the prosecution rewrite their criminal justice procedures with respect to pretrial detention remand. And so that then led to more and more trips. And so I've got my 31st trip to Uganda coming up in a couple months. So it's been a life investment in a country. Now, Rwanda said, if Uganda can do it, then we can do it. And so now Pepperdine is in Rwanda, helping them in their judiciary. Ghana heard about it. Now we're in Ghana. And now 23 African countries have said to Pepperdine, will you come? Will you come and help us? Not do things for us, not tell us what to do, but we have ideas on what we want to do. But can you help give us the know-how, give us the best practices, help us ascertain what the next steps would be, help educate and train our lawyers on how to do these things. Uganda has been doing, Africa has been doing mediation and plea bargaining and negotiation way before there was a U.S., way before there was a Western culture. It just isn't in their public justice system. And as a result, their public justice system is very inefficient. And as a result of that, leads to some externalities that are really challenging, such as vigilante justice. If the public justice system isn't going to make this wrong right, then we're going to do it ourselves. Wow. And that leads to lawlessness. And so that one simple yes from our students in 2007 saying, we'll answer Bob's call to go to Uganda has led to a continent now with a relationship with Pepperdine. And I've handed the baton off to others who are leading that. I get to participate and be involved to some degree, but as you would imagine, the life of a president doesn't allow for the kind of investment that I used to be able to make personally in the developing world.
It's such a powerful story. And you're getting to see servant leadership play out at a global scale. When you think through maybe one or two examples of servant leadership, how you see it play out here and how you see it play out in Uganda and how those might be the same or different.
Yeah. One of the benefits of this job is getting a front row seat to so many good things that so many people are doing. And many, perhaps most, are students driven by their faith, their training, their desire to be change makers themselves. And so they're leading a lot of these things. And so, as I mentioned, we've had these two students who said, I want to go to Uganda to do this. We've had professors or staff members who come alongside and say, well, what about this? You know, our Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution, which is centered in the law school, but now it's expanding to other areas. That is a mechanism for Pepperdine teaching the world how to be peacemakers. And, you know, we haven't cornered the market on it, but, you know, you ask around and you look at the rankings, you know, we're in the top 3 in the country every single year for the last, call it 20 years, oftentimes number one more often than not, on how to go about doing this. And so what we have is people from our Strauss Institute taking, you know, we started with plea bargaining because that's negotiation in the criminal realm. Negotiation in the civil realm, mediation, is something that our Strauss Institute did very, very well domestically. And so expanding that into other countries to where we have now 13, 14 chief justices from countries in Africa have gone through a training program, a 6-month training program. They got a certificate in dispute resolution through our Strauss Institute. We had about 15 or 17 Ugandan judicial officials who got a master's degree, which is a full year. They did it over 2 years remotely, most of it remotely, some of it in person. And to watch the Ugandan justices teaching and training their counterparts in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Ghana, in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, in all of these other places to where they're saying, we have learned how to do this. And we don't come in there and say, you need to do this. It's how can we be helpful? What is it what are the problems that you're looking for to be solved? And how can we be helpful? So how plea bargaining started in Uganda was two different students, Micheline and Greer, were interns in 2009 for the head of the criminal division of the Ugandan High Court, which is their trial court. So each of their divisions, criminal division, ahead of that, they're interning for him. And he takes them to the largest prison in the country, Luzira, and says, they show them, here's what's going on. And there's people in yellow shirts and there's people in orange shirts. The orange shirts are the people who have been to trial and have had their sentences. The yellow shirts are people who have been arrested and are waiting for trial. And the yellow shirts far outnumber the orange shirts. And they're like, well, what's going on here? So, well, it takes 5 years from the time of arrest to get to trial. You're arrested. You meet your lawyer 1 or 2 weeks before trial, and you're waiting for 5 years. Like, that doesn't happen in the developed world. And they didn't want it to be happening in the developing world, but the way their system was set up, the way they didn't have a public defender system where you get a lawyer as soon as you're charged. They said, we're looking to do this differently. And these two students are like, well, have you thought of plea bargaining? Because 95% of cases in the developed world are plea bargain, negotiation before trial. And they said, we've heard of this, we know a little bit about this, but we don't know, we wouldn't know where to start. So when I'm over there for my first trip in Uganda in January 2010, but our students wrote them a memo and said, this is how you would go about doing it. They did a PowerPoint presentation to the entire judiciary and said, this is how it works. These are students. These are not lawyers. These are students. So I get there in January of 10 for my first trip, and we do this kind of case preparation for the students, for the juveniles. And then I'm back there in April after one of them was convicted, and my life changed because I'd gotten close to this kid, and I decided, I need to come back and figure out how to be assistance to him. So while I'm there, the head of the criminal division says, I hear you're in town through somebody else. Can you come to my office? So I came to his office, and how you doing, Justice Lugaisi? How can I be helpful to you? He said, Greer and Micheline prepared this memo for us, and then they did this PowerPoint presentation. We want to study plea bargaining and figure out how to do it in our country. Do you have any ideas? And I said, well, why don't you come to Pepperdine? He said, I was hoping you'd say that. I said, okay, great. Well, let's try and set up a trip. He said, how's next month? Like, yes, next month. Now, I am a torts professor, civil. I'm an evidence professor. I have nothing to do with criminal law. I've never practiced in criminal law. I took criminal law in law school, like the students do, so I have an idea. But, we have criminal law professors at Pepperdine. We have criminal procedure professors. I said, okay, come. So I got professors, prosecutors, public defenders, state and federal, FBI, LAPD, federal judges, and state court judges, and we did a 1-week training program on what's plea bargaining. How does this work? And so as they were finishing this 1 week, they said, can we meet with you? I said, because I was part of this. Like, I wasn't the person teaching it because this wasn't my specialty. But when you know people and they like, yeah, and they're almost all of them had gone to Pepperdine. So they're like, yeah, we want to be helpful to you. We want to be helpful to the world. And so they said, can we go somewhere to talk about the next steps? I said, great. So we went to the library at Pepperdine overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And they said, can you pray for us before we go back that we would be able to have the courage to implement what we've learned here to help our people get access to justice? And I said, I would love to pray for you. And they said, we got one more request. They said, will you move to Uganda to help us implement this? And, I swallowed hard and said to them what I say to anybody who asks me to do something I don't want to do. I'll pray about it. And I did. And as a result of that, moved to Uganda to help them. Now, for 6 months, I'm not someone who, I didn't move there for 6 years, but 6 months, my wife and kids were 16, 13, and 11 when we moved there, and it was a very different experience for them. But that was kind of to see the Ugandans say, we want to lead our country out of this situation where we know we're not delivering the kind of justice, to see their leadership, because they don't have to do this. They don't have to take on hard things. So to watch them, and then to see that happen in mediation, and they wanted to learn about cameras in the courtroom, how that works and how we could be helpful. There was just various things, one after the other. Can you help us with this? Can you help us with this? Can you help us with this? And the answer is, I don't know jack about human trafficking, because they wanted help with that. And I said, but I know John. And John was the ambassador at large to the UN for human trafficking. And John was a friend of mine. So, hey, John, you want to go to Uganda? And there we go. Now we're helping them in human trafficking. So it's people who say yes to hard things, but knowing that those are in service of others and service of their calling to sacrificially be of use to others. And that's kind of how my life has been modeled by others who show me what that looks like, and then trying to mirror what they do or follow what they do, to be led by the mentors in my life who have done that.
Wow. Those are amazing stories. And I know that those are just scratching the surface. One of the things that's clear is that there's visions of what do you think God might be calling you to? And you kind of just praying about it and jumping in and being fully present. What are some of the headlines when you think through Pepperdine? What the vision looks like for the future? Just the headlines. You don't have to.
Yeah. Well, what we're trying to do is be the leader among higher education in a handful of areas. One of those areas is resilience training. So Pepperdine University, like every other university in the country, is inheriting incoming students who, because of this, have real challenges with mental health. It's not just that, it's also the laptop, it's also the culture, it's also whatever. But mental health challenges, people come here with those, with the biggest mental health crisis in the history of the world is happening right now. And it's been happening for the last, call it 12 to 14 years. And this is demonstrated. I've not done the research, but I've read it. Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, The Anxious Generation, his book is kind of the gold standard on this, but there's plenty of other books there and research. The idea is, how do you become resilient when you're faced with hard things and failure? And Pepperdine we've decided we are going to be a leader in faith-informed resilience training. So every single one of our students who comes through Pepperdine has to go through a resilience training program to ensure that they're equipped, or better equipped than they otherwise would be, to deal with hard things, to deal with failure. So we have a 6-part program that they have to do each semester to learn how to do this, but it's grounded in faith. It's not just, hey, buck up, try harder. It's what are the foundations of resilience? And that has to do, of course, with a lot of things, including spiritual practices, including cognitive practices, including physical health. There's a whole series of things, and so we have our vice president for student affairs, who is when's this going to air? We're launching very soon a Resilience Institute, where we've already started training K through 12 schools, churches, businesses on how to help your workforce, your parish, your congregation, your school kids be resilient. And we had a big fire. We had multiple fires here in Southern California just a couple months ago. And several of those schools were hit particularly hard. And they invited us in, can you do resilience training for our students and for our faculty and for our staff as they try to rebound from their school burning down. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be leading in. Another, we launched this new school of College of Health Science. We believe that there is an incredible opportunity and need right now in our healthcare industry, not just to have more workers, that is true, but to have the kind of workers that are informed by faith and are prepared to do hard things through this resilience training. We also believe that a vibrant spiritual life on campus contributes massively to the kind of growth that takes place during your college years. And so that's one of the things that we're investing in heavily is what we call the hub for spiritual life, where students are called into a community and we worship together and we do various teaching together, and we're building a massive village on campus to do life together. Because
I love that.
Because it's not just being friends online, but it's being people who sit across from each other and eat together, people who sit next to each other and root for the waves, people who pray together, people who exercise together. And so we're building this massive development in the middle of campus that we're calling The Mountain.
Wow.
The Mountain at Mullen Park. And the reason it's called The Mountain is you look back in the biblical, you see the various mountaintop experiences that happen. You see Mount Sinai, you see Mount Moriah, you see the Mount of Olives, you see the mount where Jesus was crucified, the hill of Golgotha, having critically important places in the biblical story about going to the mountain, I look to the mountains, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Like, we want to have that imagery constantly surrounding our students as to what is it that you're doing here? What are you being called to? And if you walk around campus now, you'll see these freedom banners everywhere. We got a theme for the year every year. This year is freedom. Last year was light. The prior year was joy. We want to continually remind students that you are made for something bigger than yourself. You're the light of the world. You are the light of the world. That where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And so we're trying to create a culture and an environment where people are led by people on the same path ahead of them, the faculty and staff and administration, that they're taught what they need to learn about the various vocations that they're going into, but to do so in a context that says there's something bigger, there's a greater purpose than simply learning accounting.
Right.
And this is where you're going to be trained to do that. So, I just, as you can tell, I love what I get to do.
It's amazing. And I just think what you have going on here is special. You can tell from the second you walk on campus and just everyone you talk to.
One more headline.
Yeah.
We want our students to see the world. Like, we're in Malibu. We're in the most beautiful place in the world. And the growth that comes on an individual level comes from stepping outside your comfort zone and learning about other cultures. We're the leading school in the country in terms of the percentage of students who go abroad during their time. And I'm not talking about a visit. I'm talking about a semester abroad, or a year, or a summer, or some combination thereof. So we got campuses in London, England, in South Kensington, just south of Hyde Park, 200 meters south of Hyde Park. We're in Vevey, Switzerland, a castle that we have acquired, built in 1760, that we've restored to its original glory and modernized, where students go and spend a semester or a year. We're in Heidelberg, Germany, overlooking the old city next to the castle up there. We have our own campus. Each of these places, we have our own campus. It's our campus. We're in Florence, Italy, right by the canal. We've got our own campus there. We're in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where students are immersed. There they don't live in the facility. We have a campus, but they live in the surrounding area where they live in a family and they come back fluent and they are immersed in the culture. We're, of course, in Washington, D.C. We're 4 blocks from the White House. We're opening up again. We were in Shanghai. Regulatory environment in China is not what it needs to be. And so we're opening up in the Far East in the next year or two. And then we'll be in Africa. Wow. We want our students to see the world and to come back, because if you go for a week, you're a tourist. If you go for a semester, you're a visitor. If you go for a year, you're part of the culture. And you come back changed. Our students come back confident, resilient, independent, adaptable to other cultures, And so that's another headline for who Pepperdine is. What we're doing is we're showing our students the world. 12% of our undergraduate students are from abroad. And so you have an international experience while you're here in Malibu, because 1 out of every 8 of your classmates didn't grow up in this culture. And so you're learning all of that. So it's a special place, as you said.
I love it. One tradition we have is for the last 60 seconds of the podcast, we ask people 10 rapid fire questions.
Let's
where
go.
You just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
First person you think of when I say servant leadership.
I would say probably Ken Starr.
All right. Favorite movie or book?
Favorite movie was the first Flatliners, because it was all the entire movie was about the consequences of sin. Favorite book, probably Beautiful Ruins.
All right.
That inspired the book that I wrote, Divine Collision. So,
and we're going to link to your book, by the way, because it's a good book. Favorite food?
Any sort of chocolate.
Favorite thing to do in your free time?
Spend time with my wife.
Wow, what's a surprising fact about you?
I mean, I can throw a football a really long way.
Favorite place you've been?
Favorite place I've been, probably the Caribbean.
Somewhere you want to go that you haven't been?
Australia.
All right, best advice you've ever received?
That discipline is the price for excellence.
Wow. Well, thank you, President Gash. This has been a real honor, and I know people will walk away inspired.
No, my pleasure. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.